Hello there and welcome back to War Thunder. Today I want to make a tank review on the IS-7, which is now the reward tank for the Summer Marathon 2018. A lot of controversy is there about this tank, a lot of claims of it being overpowered and game breaking on the one hand, others say it's balanced, and I say it's somewhere in between, because the tank itself, if you look at the statistics, which we will do later, so here is an introduction, a very fast steady gameplay, is not that exceptional, but it has a very good combination of firepower, speed, and armor protection. But it has distinct weaknesses that you need to know. Currently, it gets spammed out. A lot of people worked for it or paid for it, whatever you want to call it. Mixture of both for some. And it is a very aggressive tank. It fits the meta of War Thunder. But I cannot actually support the claim that it is outright overpowered. And let's just put it that way. It is not a broken tank, much like the IS-6 was when it was introduced, with the optics, the wrong armor models, ammunition racks not blowing up, and some shells just disappearing wherever they hit the armor. So the IS-6 was really broken and overpowered, and in that side you actually cannot really support the claim that the IS-7 is overpowered, and there are better tanks out there. It is a straightforward aggressive tank, it's fun, you have a lot of success, and it all comes down to the battle rating 8.0. Now when you look at other 7.7 heavy tanks of other nations, it was clear that the IS-7 needs to have a higher battle rating once I had a look at the performance. So 8.0 is an option, but 8.3, 8.7 battle rating already would put it into a meta where it would be really, I'm not saying useless, but where it would really suffer. So the IS-7 in a nutshell is more like a symptom of the problem of War Thunder rather than the cause. It is called compression. There is still way too much top tier compression from 6.7 onwards, and what the IS-7 actually does is it is still competitive versus higher tier tanks if you play it in the role of a medium tank with ambush tactics and disabling shots, but it is also very punishing against stock tanks and against lower tier tanks, and especially lower tier stock tanks. Funnily enough, it is actually the Germans that pose one of the biggest threats if played right, but nobody plays the mouse, which is actually a hard counter for the IS-7 and actually takes away one of the big assets, that is the mobility. In a 1 versus 1 standoff, the IS-7 has really no chance of penetrating an angled mouse, which sets it apart from tanks like the T-10M, which has just more options and is equally fast. But I also have to say that the sheer number of IS-7s when they go in wolf packs in with medium tank playstyle, really great firepower thanks to the auto-loading mechanism, and just denying this 1 versus 1 standoff where then a Leopard could ambush or take the IS-7 from the rear. And I think many people just never have the chance to shoot properly at an IS-7 and really have a proper look at its armor scheme. And this is where this tank review comes in. I will have a really in-depth detailed look at the IS-7 and its armor layout and its interiors, talk about its strength and weaknesses, and as you can see later on, I only have a test drive, so I'm a little bit jealous as a collector that I don't have the chance to get my hands on this tank. I thought that Gaijin would give them out if I really asked them nicely, but they just lengthened my test drive. So all of you that worked for it really hard or paid for certain items to actually build it together, I am a little bit jealous. But I have to say, this tank is not as special as an E100. I'm not saying this because I have the E100, but I really have played now a lot of battles in the IS-7. I've played a lot of battles in the E100, and the E100 combines also one factor with the IS-7, that it is unknown. how exactly you have to take it on versus an experienced D100 driver. It's the same as we'll see in the future with experienced IS-7 drivers. They will look like they're completely broken, overpowered, or just too strong, and I think this tank review will help that we come over this claim. So again, I think the IS-7 is very strong, very, very strong. It gets spammed out. It's very punishing against lower tier vessels, especially stock tanks that have problems, one-shotting it from the front because of the very strong hull and the bouncy turret. But it's not broken, it's not really overpowered, and I just want to show you that. Especially now we have, one of the claims that I always have is like, the biggest asset of Soviet tanks is that they don't have to fight other Soviet tanks. And with that in mind, I have some mixed battles for you which are currently happening, which nobody really likes, that really specializes on tank RB. So let's have a look at the IS-7, shall we? So we want to begin with the armor, and this pike nose design is very similar in its shape and build up to the one of the IS-3 and the T10M, but it's thicker than both of them, and the lower glacis alone is 150 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor, so that's practically as effective with the slope angle of 50 degrees in most battles as the upper frontal glacis of a Tiger II. So that means that shells of the M103 and the Surbassé and the Foch might be able to penetrate it, the stock rounds, that is, the solid shots. The upper frontal glacis is also 150 millimeters thick, and as you can see, the effective thickness is, well, up to 360 millimeters. So that means if you have it angled like this and you shoot here even with an L7 heat, it will not go through, but it will go through this much more. But 90 millimeter heat rounds will have a lot of trouble. Also, surprisingly, as we can see in the protection analysis, if we go to Britain and we go to rank 6 and we go to the Chieftain Mark III, the APDS will go through the lower glacis, but not so much the upper glacis. And if we then take the hash round, where is it? There it is. It should penetrate it, but according to the protection analysis, it doesn't. So much for those, hits. Then this driver's port is 100 millimeters thick and 100 millimeters as well here at nearly 80 degrees of angle. Don't shoot here. This is not a supposed weak spot like on the IS-3 or IS-4. So this is now the front of the hull. The side of the hull is 100 millimeters thick. That is proper protection like with the KV-220. But just as you might know, it is kind of misleading because this is the flat part and here we have now 20 millimeters. So that is just, you actually very often can shoot under this tank if you have it from the side, and you want to avoid also this angled part where it just has this part of side armor like the IS-3, and that is really a tough nut to crack. As well as the upper bar here, steel bar, is 150 millimeters thick. Here we have some spaced armor, neglecting a lot of the hash rounds. The rear of the tank is not that strong with 60 millimeters at 56 and 20 degrees. I got deleted here by Coelians, so that tells you quite a lot. The top of the rear is just 5 millimeters and 20 millimeters, so you are surprisingly vulnerable here on the engine deck to cannon fire, even from American 20 millimeters, sometimes even 50 calibers when a plane was doing a suicide run. Your engine gets knocked out, your fuel tanks catch fire. This is not that thick actually, so for air attacks it is vulnerable. Then we come to the turret, and I have to say overall the look of the IS-7 is dominated by this, well, broad turret that just is very, very strong. But not as strong as you might think, because here we have 220 millimeters, it's very bouncy here, and here we also have parts that can be penetrated by pixel hunting by German 128 millimeter guns, which this tank actually was supposed to withstand. here the flat part, and when you hit this part here, it always goes directly towards the gun breech and knocks it out. And that is just so annoying. So shooting here either the gun muzzle brake, the gun barrel, or here around it gives you very often a knockout blow for the firepower of the IS-7. Also here I got very often penetrated. Now, two further weak spots. First of all, this part here, you might see it, this viewport is flat, and it is a really good working weak spot. So you can actually penetrate this with a pentagon if you have the time to aim there, of course. And then we also have this working cupola. I penetrated here this part with normal regular guns that fire APCBC rounds or overall APHE rounds. Also, this is a good catcher for HESH rounds, and then it will splash down. The side of the turret is very thick and very bouncy. Even here we have 200 millimeters, so it is not very easy to fight this tank. And when you angle the tank overall and wiggle the turret and wiggle the hull, which it has the horsepower to do so, as we will see later on, then it is difficult to make the shots. And this is where this tank is then that strong in ricocheting and denying you the hits on the rather small weak spots. So how to take one of those tanks out? If you have the chance, aim at the gun. Either you knock out the gun or the gun breech with hitting here this part with APDS, with even the 128mm from the Germans. And I am really saying this because you face those tanks on a regular basis. On the other hand, if somebody has an ATGM, he just aims somewhere and just penetrates you. So you don't have any sort of era or NERA protection, something like this. And the rear of the turret is 80mm, 99mm, 63mm. This is easy to penetrate. The roof of the turret is 40mm, 30mm, so it's significantly stronger, up to 50mm, than the back of the engine deck. So aim for there. But yeah, it has its limits and it has weak spots. So now let's have a look at the X-ray, and we can see, oh boy, we have 5 crew members, the driver obviously in the middle, then we have the commander, one loader and a second loader and a gunner, and those 2 loaders actually feed here the ready rack, 8 rounds in total, so 3 in the ready rack itself, 1 is in the breech, and that can lead you into problems. Your reload is set to 10 seconds because this is ultimately an autoloader, but then you have to go through the long reload cycle of this autoloader. One tip here: if you go into a capture zone and reload ammunition there, it firstly gets loaded up here on this ready rack, and that saves you a lot of time. You can see here the massive gun breech that gets knocked out very often, and you can see that there is ammunition scattered all around the tank. There is nearly no place where you can shoot through and not hit ammunition. And also, I never had the ammunition fading, just going black and disappearing. It always blew up. And this is then where, you know, this tank is just not broken. It's working as intended. But overall, it is very, very strong. So then we'll talk about the other stats like the firepower and the mobility. And yeah, let's go right into it. The first in-depth look we have to do on the mobility, and it is very impressive actually for the IS-7, and the stats are slightly deceiving because you can see we have here the strongest engine. We are not the heaviest tank, but one of the more heavier tanks. Actually, we are the heaviest just after the mouse, but the mouse is being an exception. So the overall horsepower to ton ratio with 15.4 is kind of, you know, average. It's somewhere between the T10M and the T62. However, the top speed is just the second highest after the Leopard 1 main battle tank, and that tank has no armor whatsoever in comparison to the IS-7. Also, the reverse speed is also the second highest with -23, and that just trumps really the IS-4 and also the T10M. But is comparable to, actually surprisingly, the mouse which many people just don't know, and also the Leopard 1 being slightly faster. So that is like the IS-7 is okayish with its mobility. But it's really the combination of this heavy armor and that mobility and what feels like good ground pressure, so it actually doesn't have that much drag on medium terrain, that you actually can reach a respectable 40-45 kilometers an hour, and downhill you then have the massive speed advantage compared to the top speed of something like an M103. But something like the MX-50 Super C is right on your heels. It has a little bit less horsepower to ton ratio and of course much less armor, but we will compare those tanks in detail just later. So we have a very strong engine with a lot of grunt in it, we have a lot of weight, and we have a, well, kind of average horsepower to ton ratio. And with now the fixed issues, or the issues that have been fixed, like that you don't get to a dead stop when you hit a wooden barrel or when you go through a fence, that really gives you the feeling of this continuous rolling force. And when you are together with many IS-7s, you just have the feeling that you just overrun the enemy, because they have split forces, because you just then one-shot the Leopards, or you know, if they disable you, there is another IS-7 that then kills the Leopard, and then you go with 2 IS-7s versus the mouse that comes later on. And this is a scenario that I just happen to witness quite often. So let's move on then to the firepower. Now this is where the IS-7 is kind of a bit of an exception compared to some of the other Russian tanks, because we have here the highest caliber, 130mm, followed by the mouse with 128mm of the C-70 gun. And we have 30 rounds to fire, so the amount of ammunition is not the highest. But even in a T-10M or an IS-4 or a M103, where you have comparable amounts of ammunition, you never use that many rounds in one battle, do you? And this is where the big exception to, or the difference to, the IS-4M and the T-10M comes in. The reload. We have an auto-loading mechanism that gives us a 10.0 second reload for 8 rounds before the complete reload starts, or where you then have to go into cap to reload and so forth. And this is like more than double the reload of the IS-4M, or the reload speed rather. And you can see here that the Leopard has 6.7, the color code is here wrong, the Chieftain has 7.7 seconds, and the MX-50 Super C, with a comparable gun that is slightly better overall, as we will see later on, has now 7.5 seconds with a shell that has more penetration in a 19-shot autoloader. So it is good. It is really good, but it's not exceptional. And this is more like, then again, a symptom if you compare it to the mouse or the IS-4M, which have such much longer reloads. But the mouse has one trump over the IS-7, and that is the coaxial 75mm, but a lot of people do not really use it. The turret rotation speed with 20 degrees per second is great, and again much faster than the IS-4M or the mouse, but if we put it into direct comparison, it's just 3 degrees per second more than the T-10M or the T-62, and also just 50% less than the MX-50 Super C, or which is 50% faster in the turret rotation speed. And the trend continues. Where it really has bad statistics is the gun depression. -3 degrees is not a lot. That's just a third of the Leopard, just to put things into perspective, and just half of what the T-62 has. And 15 degrees of gun elevation is also not very helpful, combined with the 3.5 degrees per second gun elevation speed. That is really slow. That's even slower than the mouse. And that means that your coaxial machine gun and also the 14.5mm machine gun on top of the turret elevate with the same speed, so they are not independent. And so to effectively shoot at aircraft, which might have been a very unique selling point, or not really unique, but you know, a better selling point, is rather rare. So there you have it. Not exceptional gun firepower. When we talk about the ammunition, we have to talk about two shell types, and you can see here also immediately the comparison statistics. We have the BR482B, which is an APCBC round, muzzle velocity of 900 meters per second, slowest here in comparison, but not by much. We have a TNT equivalent filling of just under 200 grams, which is comparable with the T10M, but not even close to the Maus E100. But 200 grams is usually more than enough to one-shot your opposition. And yeah, the good thing about it is the rather good fuse sensitivity of 15 millimeters. So that's nearly half of the German 128 millimeters, which overpenetrates much more often against lightly armored vessels. So that is very good, and it's desperately needed because the high explosive shell, which is the OF482M, is rather unreliable. So first of all, 900 meters per second muzzle velocity is respectable. In this case, it's actually one of the faster high explosive shells. Different rules, of course, to high explosive shells, and 2.65 kilograms of TNT filling. But I have no idea how the fuse sensitivity and the fuse delay works, because this shell is rather underwhelming. Let's have a look at those clips. So this is in the test drive, and this is an IS-4M with 36 millimeters of penetration, and we aim at the roof of the Panzer II and we get the kill. The IS-7 on the other hand, well, the first shot at the same place, much less damage. We actually need a second shot to get the kill that we deserve on this rather lower battle rating tank, I'd say. And as long as hull break doesn't get triggered, it is rather underwhelming. So you have the 14.5 millimeter machine guns, but they have a rather fixed mounting and a rather poor gun elevation speed. So in this respect, the IS-7 is not that good. But however, you can say it has, with 10 seconds reload, much better choice of adapting to a situation. And to that argument, I agree. So now I want to show you a few scenes where it becomes really obvious where the greatness of the IS-7 comes in. We actually were faster because we were directly driving on the road than a Leopard coming out of their spawn. He was maybe, you know, stuck, maybe he was just not paying attention, ramming into some things. And we have our second kill, Begleitpanzer, beautiful. And we are already behind enemy lines. And this is more like a light tank or medium tank playstyle. Now what you must know is this here. This guy just didn't take any action. I had time to aim, and AP-CBC rounds or APHE rounds in general are really great against Leopards. However, this Leopard surprised me in the reload, and before I could reload and finish him off, he took out my gun breech. And this happens very, very often. And if it wouldn't have been for this second IS-7, eventually this Leopard would have killed me. If he would have realized that my gun breech was taken out, he would have just loaded a heat, if he has it as a tier 4 upgrade, and just finished me off. And again, it is punishing vehicles that are not fully upgraded, stock tanks. It's punishing 1 versus 1 tanks. When you go in with several IS-7s in wolf packs, then this tank is just a true force of nature. You can disable him, you can knock him out, and eventually finish him off. But you need the time, and the rest of the Soviet teams, they just don't give it. It's the overall performance of the Soviet teams that is so powerful, that is that overpowered. In contrast to, well, German teams that have a big difference in overall term setups. It's how the maps are set up, cityfied, where gun depression or lack of doesn't really matter. This is really the important factor that you need to take into consideration. If you can track an IS-7 on the slopes, you just have so much more freedom. He has so many difficulties getting gun on you, and some people just don't realize this. This tank has weaknesses. And there you can see, I tried to take him out. Actually, with machine gun fire, I have both 14.5 millimeters, but it just don't do the damage. And those are Ostwinds, you know. They don't have the very strongest armor. And again, it takes me 2 shots to finish him off. So at some points you really feel the similarity to the, well, mouse gun or the Jagdtiger gun. But you just have so much better gun handling in terms of turret rotation speed and reload. But you have less gun depression. But your mobility gives you also the better advantage in getting this gun on target. And this is the scene that I wanted to show you. Another great scene is this here, and I was rushing in very early on. You can see I'm very much ahead of my team. And then I bounce a heat shell from an AMX 30. So that was luck that he just hit the slope part of my armor. I see another tank firing. I'm kind of in the open. I finished this guy off that was actually killing my IS-6 buddy. And now my gun breach again gets hit. No other damage so far but the gun breach. I pop the smoke barrel, wiggle my tank and absorb the other heat shell. And I have time to retreat and eventually repair, continue the fight. And this is again the strength of the IS-7, the opportunity to smoke up and to disengage. The following scene is also very interesting because I have a duel with multiple IS-7s, and again, as I want to point out, this gun is in overall shell performance very similar to the German 128mm. It's just the overall round package that makes that gun seemingly overpowered. The autoloader and also the mobility of the tank with better turret rotation speed, so you actually can fire on the opponent. And here we have a mixed match. This is another IS-7. How do you deal with him? And he wiggles the tank and we take out the cannon barrel. So now he cannot fire. And now I want to just track him while I cap the point. So if it wouldn't be for the cap, I would have charged him and finished him off directly. And at this point I think to myself, wait a second. There is this cupola stuff, this weak spot on top. But I decide to actually further disable him by killing now the gun breech. You could see him that I didn't hit the gun barrel, but actually the gun mantle, the shell passed through, and we actually finish him off with the fourth shell now in the cupola. But you could see him, he was trying to retreat, he was trying to wiggle the turret, and that was kind of the combination of knowledge, preparation, but also then a bit of luck that I actually aimed correctly here. But it was the plan in my mind that I had the actually first disabling shot that decided the outcome of the battle. But it's not really over yet because there is now 2 more IS-7s going around. And we have this guy here, and I missed aim here. That was a bad shot, I disagree. But the shell actually passed through the entire length of the tank without igniting. And this is now the point where a lot of people just don't realize why I criticize APCBC rounds, and it doesn't really matter on the nation. And here we can see actually why I say one of the biggest advantages of the Russians is that they don't face each other. Object 120 just instant deleted me here. Another scene is here on Berlin. I bypassed the fight in the middle, so many of my team members were going in, and now I actually, after interrupting here one guy's advantage that tried to flank our team, I am now near the spawn, but now an ATGM hits me. Now you notice again, it's only the gun breech that gets damaged. I pop here the smoke, and I was very lucky that then the spaced armor on the side of the tank actually absorbed the ATGM. Again we pop smoke, and again we retreat into hard cover to, well, repair the tank. And that is also very important to know that this is a strength of the tank, this French mode. A few minutes later the battle was decided and we were, observing the enemy's spawn. And now this happens. Actually, this Coelian appeared behind me. I had no idea he was there, and I actually bounced here on the heavily sloped upper frontal glacis while he was going downhill. And now I cannot do anything against it. He actually tracks me, disables my gun, and I cannot depress the gun on him, and my 14.5mm are not that useful against a Coelian. And none of my team members is around, and now he sets me on fire, and my repair got interrupted. I tried again, and now my, fire extinguisher is on cooldown again. Gaijin. And he sets me on fire again. Now remember, this guy's APHE rounds just have what, 60-65 millimeters of penetration, and he penetrates the rear of my tank. So the rear end of this tank is not as heavily armored as, for instance, an IS-4. And he sets me on fire for the third time, and I will burn down. And, well, my team member arrives way too late to help me against this Coelian, and that's a AAA. So I just wanted to point this out to give you a bit of more confidence in fighting an IS-7. Yes, it's very situational. Yes, eventually he got killed. Yes, they lost the match. But they got me. I wasn't paying attention and I got punished for it. Don't rush the shots. Aim them carefully and disable the tank and then hunt them down. Build your own wolf packs. Ambush the tank. It very often overextends by itself. Now the reason why I show you now this battle, because all the things that happened were kind of silly. It is a silly match. It's not the match with the most kills, with a 9 kill 4 cap orgy that I had, where I showed you the result screen because I lost it anyway. And I wanted to show you this because it was satisfying. It was a satisfying battle against tanks that are normally built to kind of counter you on paper. Again, I tried to use here the mobility to flank around on the open and to then go here to the dip where normally there is another capture zone and try to attack A from the side. So because obviously the enemy will mostly come from the A5 area spawn, and therefore I have then a better angle of attack. I got shot once and now my engine is on fire. I have to immediately extinguish. I rotate my turret into that direction and now I get tracked. Another heat shell comes in. I briefly spotted a tank there. I have no idea where the shells are coming from. So I open up my kind of view angles by third person view, and I aim here at this Leopard and we one-shot him rather. And his colleague here, the other customer, makes it smarter. He shoots at us and then he retreats, but I have the range down. I really like the magnification ratio on this scope. It's just so much better than on the Jagdtiger, which is just too much for me personally. And also the mouse, where it's just so tiny lines and with no magnification. And I killed them both at range, and they were shooting at me with heat from the side. So they were hitting my turret front at very thick parts. They were hitting the angled part, maybe the spaced armor, I don't know, but I was lucky to survive that here, and they were not having the best shots in return. And it's scenes like these that bring people to the conclusion that the tank is overpowered. Well, they penetrated me from the side, but I didn't hit ammunition. If they would have hit ammunition, I would blow up. And this is then the thing. This tank is tricky to take down. It's difficult to take down, but it's not impossible, overpowered, nonsense RNG fest like. And so it's right at the edge. Again, when we talk about the battle rating here, if the matchmaker gives you a lot of down tiers, that you are top tier predator and you have a lot of other IS-7s in your team and you build those wolf packs, you're practically unstoppable. Make no mistake, you're very, very strong. And that one-shot shell is always very good if you fight AMX 30s, if you face also lightly armored tanks, if you face leopards. They're really, really great to get killed with a shell like this. And for instance, like let's take this case here. My rangefinder just goes just above 1,000 meters, and this guy is well in excess of that range. So range finding makes no sense. And now with a third shot, and this is the advantage because within 20 seconds I have the third shot out, and he's moving, I move, and then the shell hits home. Mwah. What a beautiful, beautiful kill, and that was just so satisfying. That was really, really amazing. Now, in the upcoming days, I will show you some more gameplays. We'll make more videos about this tank, and we'll make them some different parts of the tank review, extended commented gameplay, which is, in my opinion, important. But I think it's this battle that just shows the combination of overall teamwork, flanking attitude, mobility aspect, overall protection, and a bit of luck, and the mistakes of the enemies, because I just have to hit them once to destroy them. So if I take it up like this in my argumentation, it's very difficult to see how this tank is not overpowered. But then you are constantly facing higher tier battle rating tanks such as the XM1, such as other tanks with stabilizer, heat FS, ATGMs with equal or even better mobility, and then you come to the realization, if you face superior opponents at higher battle ratings, that this tank has no place at higher battle ratings. So again, it's more of a symptom of the compression rather than the actual cause. There are dozens of other tanks in the game there that are well misplaced. Again, remember, you don't have AP FSDS, you don't have a 7-second reload, you don't have heat FS, you have no stabilizer, therefore you don't have a very good rangefinder. Again, here this case, yeah, I'm not that used to it. It was one of the earlier battles, I'd say, that I played with this tank. He's misaiming and I'm just shooting here. I hit here now the machine gun, and now I can really greatly adjust the aim, and his mistake was just to lurk around against the more or less hull down IS-7, and I hit his lower glacis on his STB-1. In close quarters, the STB-1 with a stabilizer, the faster rate of fire, can be an issue, can be a really big threat. So, 4 kills already in the bag, and now I have to go through the reload cycle, and I always take a lot of ammunition out of the tank to reduce the chance of an ammunition rack blow up. But situational awareness with this tank is always great to then get shots like these, and this is where the increased turret rotation speed compared to a mouse with the better reload comes in. So it's up to you to put yourself into a position where the lack of gun depression doesn't really matter on flat terrain, city fights, cap circles that are not in a hilly terrain, and to just look around, observe where you're going. And you can see how much I have to expose of my tank, and how this tank is oblivious to my presence up until it is too late. And this is why we get the 6th kill that early. Actually, this shell doesn't go through the upper frontal glacis of a Tiger II, but goes through the lower glacis and the transmission, much like the Jagdtiger or the M103's AP round. So you have to really take that into account. And for instance, this Tiger, in a very rare occasion, was not one shot. So I don't know what happened here. Obviously, you know, the Tiger II is overpowered and has to be nerfed, battle rating 8.0. Nonsense. Was just 1 in a 10 shots to not blow him up with a turret hit. Actually, I hit the loader side, so maybe that's the reason why. And again, now I have to go through the entire reload cycle, and then I can reload that shell. And now I need to hold my breath up until the point that I reload another shell. So I just wanted to show you that as well. There are limits to the autoloader in intense battles. This tank overall has a cooldown time. It needs time to reload the autoloader. And if you compare it to the MX-50 Silver C, which has a 19-round autoloader, it doesn't know this problem. Or if you look at the mouse, it doesn't have this cooldown, and it can angle the tank, making it much more resilient, and doesn't really have that awkward weak spots. And overall also has here the advantage of the 75mm coaxial gun. Now, in my revisit of some of the tank destroyers, I always pointed out how important a coaxial machine gun is, but those are casemate tank destroyers. It is something completely different with a tank. And yes, those heavy machine guns are nice. I got kills with them. They are useful. You can at least threaten planes. But as you can see, the elevation speed of the top mounted 14.5mm is the same. Okay, here are the crew members knocked out, but you would see it in the previous gameplays if you would have paid attention. So it's not like an American 50 cal. Also, you have a magazine, or rather a belt of what seems like 50 rounds, whereas the American 50 cal just continues to fire and fires and fires and fires, and that is a huge difference. So nothing more happened, so I end the match right here. Again, it was not the match with the most kills or the most action, but it was just a straightforward cleanup. 7 kills, 1 enemy kill assist, and we got 46,000 silver lines and 4,150 research points with a survivor medal. That was now the tank review on the IS-7. I hope you could learn its weak spots and know how to deal with them in the future. And eventually the spam of this tank will die down, and then I guess normal service will return to War Thunder. It is a good tank. It is worth, maybe if you consider buying it, $50–60 for a collector, but overall there are also very good tanks that perform similar or even better. The T62, the T10M, or the Object 120 have all their different aspects and outperform this tank in one way or another. And this is the clear message. This tank has accessible weak spots. It has the vulnerability with the gun breech and the gun barrel, and then it has some really great performance with the mobility, and that makes it rather difficult to actually track down and hunt down once you have disabled it. So the best weapon against this tank is, again, teamwork. Don't rush in blindly, you will lose against this tank. But if you face Soviet tanks, that is not a new message to you. That's it for me today, so thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other on the battlefields of War Thunder.